Okay, is everybody ready to go? Kristen and Skitch.
Yep.
I believe so.
Wonderful. Well, welcome back, everyone. And Kristen, I will turn it over to you now.
Okay. Thank you very much, Marcy. I'm very excited to be here again to introduce you all to Skitch Mannion. For those of you who were not here yesterday, I'm just going to review his bio here. Skitch has been blowing glass since he was 10. So he's been devoted to that material ever since. I know from personally getting to work with him here in the Wheaton Art Studio that he does an amazing job, not just creating some of the product you see, but also gaffing and working with artists across the spectrum, from those who have been working with glass for a long time to those who have never seen glass, along a variety of their career stages, to help them get their vision through the medium of glass. In addition to working in our art studio, he also worked as a head gaffer and studio manager at John Pomp Studios in Philadelphia. So that was a furniture and lighting company. He's also has his own company, Working Man Handmade, which is dedicated to creating well-designed and well-crafted objects that are comfortable and relatable. Often his own work is inspired by some of the traditional Italian glassmaking techniques. So yesterday we got to see him make a lily pad pitcher, which is indicative of the early South Jersey glass tradition with a more dramatic and, as we learned through Mary, Norwegian origins. And today he's going to show us one of those Italian techniques, reticello technique. Marcy, if you could pull up the slide of the image of the piece he's going to make. So you can see here this amazing technique that is very complex. So he's going to walk us through the video, and please feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. So I will shoot them over to Skitch and he will answer them while he's showing us this amazing technique.
Thank you very much, Kristen, for the introduction. I'm going to jump right in here because this is a long video. So what we're looking at here on the left are a series of color bars or rods of concentrated colored glass. This glass that you're looking at is a variety that is used specifically for cane working. It is a very hard glass. Its name derives from the word hard, which is duro or durable in the Venetian dialect. So the first thing we have to do in this long process is pull a series of canes. And Eric and I are working together again. We started already the day early in the morning. We pulled about half a dozen canes already. So what we're going to do here is we're going to walk you through the process of pulling a cane. So Eric has picked up a piece of this color bar in what's called a garage. It's basically a hot chamber. It's not quite hot enough to melt the glass, but it's hot enough to keep the glass at a state which we can work it. So Eric has picked up a piece of that color bar, and it's very, very hard and very fragile. So it's got to be preheated. So what he's doing is he's rotating that in a box that's about 1,000 degrees. And what he's going to do is let that piece of color saturate with a high enough temperature to move it from the 1,000-degree chamber to the 2,400-degree chamber. So he's actually just turning that in a hotter portion of the box, and then he's going to walk over and start to pull it. Now, this glass is very, very hard, as I keep saying, so it doesn't actually want to stick to clear glass. So what you're going to see us do here is a very common practice in cane pulling, where we put the glass that's going to be the center of the cane on a metal rod. It doesn't have any clear glass on the end. It's literally a solid metal rod and then the color. So he's making sure it's clean. Glass actually will show fingerprints. It'll show dirt. It'll show dust. Even if it gets really hot, the oils and things from your hand will stay on the surface of the glass. So this is a white color, and it's very, very prominent to show different things. So for instance, like if I was to touch it with my dirty hands, you would see striations of dark dirt in the cane. And the technique itself lends itself to perfection. So we want to make sure everything's really clean. So what Eric is doing here is he's basically heating the color as hot as he can get it, and then cooling the outside to drive that heat into the center. So as he's doing that, I am going to have a rod that is very hot on the end. And when Eric deems it's hot enough, we're going to cut that off onto my metal rod, and that'll be the very center of the cane pull. So this white color is very indicative of the Reticello. There's a variety of colors you can do this in. I've done it in non-duro colors. I've done it in homemade colors. It pretty much lends itself to white though. So you'll see we're going to stick it on the rod. It's going to stick to the rod. I'm going to cut it off. So right there, that colored glass is stuck to the end of the metal rod. And it's very complicated to explain, but if I was to have a little bit of clear on that rod and try to pull that cane, the clear, which gets hotter quicker than the color, would start to pull, and I would lose probably 3 to 6 feet of cane. So if I put that color directly onto the rod, it has no chance of pulling off because it is literally connected to the foundation. So here I'm showing,
yes. How come white is such a good color to use for this technique?
Well, the white itself, its makeup is traditionally a stiff color. So it has a lot of fluorine, a lot of arsenic, a lot of heavy metals that require it to stay prominently white. Other colors would bleed out and you would have a bleeding in the pattern. So for instance, if you are going to pull a cane very thin, you would lose the ability for the color to be dense. But white generally stays dense because of what it's chemically made with. So here we've got the first gather of glass on the color. This is going to be 2 gathers to pull this cane. It's much easier to pull a cane that is smaller than it is to pull a cane that is bigger. So you will see oftentimes I do smaller cane pulls and more of them. So here I'm pulling the end, and what I'm doing is I'm bringing that color and the furnace glass to a point so that when I pull it, there's very little transparent furnace glass and very much more of the white at the end. So you'll see I'm going to be necking it in, and I'm actually going to break this off. This is a very important part. When I break this off of here, this very little nub that I made, it exposes the white on the inside. And what that allows me to do is have the white closer to the edge of the pull so it pulls more evenly. So here we're going to be creating a constriction, and then when it's cold enough, I'm just going to snap it. I'm just going to break it right off of there. You'll see I'll just hit it towards the ground. So here we're going to hit it, and you see it's just going to break right off the end there. Now what that does is that exposes the white color on the inside. And why that's so important is because this color will not move uniformly if there's a lot of other glass at the end. And the furnace glass is much hotter. This is a transparent mint color that I made. So the mint color on top of the white will become very, very bright. So once again, we're gathering on it. Now simultaneously, while we're gathering on this, Eric is going to make the post that I pulled this cane with. So right after we cool the pipe, I'm probably telling him right now, I said, okay, after you get done cooling the pipe, you can make the post. We've already pulled 6 canes. So he's going to know to go get the post. The post is just a handle for me to pull this cane with. It's not necessarily a part of the piece that we're going to use later on. It just helps me pull this cane about 100 feet. So he's gathering up the post. I'm going to be shaping this. We want this to happen relatively quickly because the heat from the gather dictates how the cane pulls out. So if we take forever to do this, the cane is going to pull out very uneven. So we want to move as quickly as possible. I'm ready to go. I'm basically waiting for Eric, and I'm always waiting for the assistant in this aspect of technique because I'm ready as soon as I take my first roll on the table. So Eric is going to shape that. He's going to cool the rod, and then we'll begin the pull. So I'm going over and I'm reheating this, and I'm not going to be taking a very long heat because I don't want to overheat it and cause the heat to be uneven. But what I'm going to be doing is heating and rolling and trying to drive that heat to the core. It's very hot. You'll see this is a very viscous movement that we're going to do. Eric is going to stand over by a set of wooden ladders that we have on the ground. And what's going to happen is I'm going to walk over. I'm going to actually drip the cane setup onto this post. And I'm going to dictate the diameter of the cane that we're trying to pull. So here you can see it's moving pretty good. attaches to the post. I'm turning. Now what I'm looking at is the diameter closest to the top of this setup. You can see I'm watching it and I'm dictating the thickness. So I have the mass that it pulls off of, and Eric has the diameter at which I want it to be. So I'm telling him to walk slow and steady, and I'm watching it pull out of my piece. And as it pulls out and I watch the diameter, if I tell him to speed up, it'll get thinner. If I tell him to slow down, it'll get thicker. So what's really important here is that I'm dictating what's happening. I have the mass that we're pulling from, so I can constantly watch it. By now, the glass that Eric has is already too cold to stretch. So everything that's happening is happening out of my setup. And this is how most canes are pulled. There's a variety of canes out there. This cane is called a filigrana, which means a filament. So it has one strand of color in the center, and it has a transparent color on the outside. I could do it out of clear, but I chose a color because I feel like it would brighten up the white a little bit more in order for it to be a little bit different. And you'll see we're pulling this. What's up by me, you can see is still glowing. It's still pulling out. Normally I pull canes about 75 to 100 feet. I've pulled canes up to 300 feet, depending upon what the need is. But we don't have a lot of room in the studio to pull these canes, so I pull them about 100 feet.
Now, does that have to be annealed, or is because of the shape it does not?
Well, it doesn't have to be annealed because of the shape, but also I'm going to be using it right away. So it really doesn't it gets cold to room temperature for me to handle it, but it doesn't really affect the stress level because I'm going to be heating it up again. And a round shape has a tendency to heat up quicker. Now you can see the white in the center and then the green on the outside. Now, the next step that we have to do is cut these canes up. So this is our morning pull. This was about an hour to 2 hours worth of pulling. Generally, I pull cane for an entire day. So I pull it for about 8 hours, and that'll give me enough cane to work for a couple sessions. This is my cane cutter. It's a very simple tool. I saw these in Murano when I worked there, and I said, this is perfect. I need to make one of these. So I made one, and basically all it is a piece of sharp tool steel, and it has a series of cuts that dictate the length of the canes. Here we're using a cane that's about a 6 1/4 inch long cane. You could go longer if you want, but it's really not important. In order for you to do a longer cane, you'd have to change the dynamic of the entire cane structure. The filament would have to be bigger. You would have to do a lot of different things. So basically, we're going with a 6-inch cane. So we're going to keep cutting these up. Eric has another cutter that we're going to use. I have 3 cutters. So normally when I have 2 other assistants, by the time we pull the first cane, the assistant's cutting it up and getting it ready so I can see what we have. So we can say, okay, we need to pull a little more of this. We need to pull a little more of that. I pull quite a bit of cane, a couple 100 pounds, and that really dictates a lot of consistency. If I was to pull 1 cane to try to get the reticello out of it, it really wouldn't be a smart move. So you'll see Eric's on his chopper here cutting the canes up. We move through this pretty quickly because the next step is a lot more meticulous where we have to sort the canes. Sorting the canes it's a meticulous process, but if you pull a consistent cane, it's not like trying to find a needle in a haystack. You're more or less going through a very nominal amount. And Eric's cane chopper is much nicer than mine because it was a gift from a friend of mine. I kind of made mine out of like stuff laying around. So. And the whole point here is that you want to create even length. You know, if you think about the piece you're making, for instance, if you think about making a 12-inch plate and you have a 6-inch cane, you're going to have a lot of density there. So you'll see, I sit down, I go through the canes. This is all done by eye. There are gauges. You can use a drill gauge. You can use measuring tape. You can use a caliper, but I just trust my eye. So I go through, I pull out everything that's big, and I find the most consistent diameter that I have. So I'm going to go through and get rid of everything that's inconsistent. I'm just going to put it aside and then see what I have the most of. And that's what I make the reticello out of. Now this video is 51 minutes long, but the real time that it took us to do this was about 4.5 hours from start to finish. We didn't stop one time. That's the cane pulling process lends itself to a lot of time. Pulling the canes, cutting them up, sorting them. All that is usually done ahead of time. So I'd make 3 to 5 reticellos in one day. And you can see the mint color on the white. It looks pretty nice. It's very subtle. And as we build this piece, it'll get denser because we're layering and layering and layering. So it gets a lot denser. It actually looks really nice. So, you know, I can feel the differences in height. And I basically am just putting them underneath the table. You'll see a pile down there. That's just going to be used for something later. If I have enough of that size, I could make a Reticello out of that. But I look for a very specific size. About the size of a pencil is really nice. I competed in a competition years and years ago, a Reticello competition where you needed to use a minimum of 200 canes. So the canes needed to be a certain diameter. So the 200 canes was pretty long. This pickup is about 66 canes per side. So it's about 9 by 12 is the plate that I use. So 200 canes is quite a bit longer. If I was making a bigger piece, I would use a bigger plate. I wouldn't make a bigger cane. I would use more of them. So once again, sorting them. This is a very important part of the process because this kind of dictates the look of the pattern. If you skimp and really don't look through these carefully, you'll see very, very, very prominent inconsistencies in your pattern. And that's not something you want to deal with. So what's on the bottom or closest to me in this video is going to be what I use. So that's all the canes. And now I've divided them up. There's my plates. They're called Pastorelli plates. They are not steel. They're cast iron. Cast iron does not scale. So therefore, if it gets hot, it will not leave metal on the glass. You'll see me crouching down to look at the pickup from the side to see this, how the diameters line up. It's a very important part of the process to take your time here and look. So we're making sure it's clean. We have a bit of kiln wash on there. It's actually just mud from the creek outside. Glass will not stick to anything that's dirty. So dirt is the best thing. You can use $200 kiln wash, but the mud outside is just as good. So there I'm laying them out on the plate, making sure it all fits. Now I've spent the last 45 minutes to an hour sorting these, so I know I can just put them on as I please. I don't need to look at them too much because I've already spent the time looking at them, making sure everything's nice and square. And then we're going to put this in the garage once again to preheat. The plate and the canes are all going to heat up at the same rate. So we're going to measure it here with a caliper. This is called a pi divider. It does divide by pi. There is one fraction that is not accounted for, which is the height of the pickup. So that's something where you can measure the length, but honestly, you know, it's really an eyeball situation because the caliper gets you within tolerance. And then you need to be able to understand how the height of the pickup affects it. Once again, looking at the side, my last chance to make any changes before we start heating this up. So you see, I saw one cane there that I didn't like. We're taking it out. We're going to put another cane in, and I'm just going to discard that cane. Looking down, make sure it's all right. So now Eric's going to put this in the garage. He's never done this process with me before, so he's a little skittish. But you know, we talked through it, and I'm basically telling him everything I need as I need it. So he's putting that in the cold side, which is about 1,000 degrees. It's going to sit there for probably 15 minutes. These canes can take abuse pretty well. They can get hot and cold, hot and cold, hot and cold. So basically, what I do is I let it sit in there so that everything's one uniform temperature. You can see me turning up the garage. There's the pattern in the garage. It doesn't need to get very hot because it's going to get really hot in a second. And the name of the game in the Reticello technique is even. Everything needs to be even. Temperature, thickness, everything you're doing. You're never just heating one part of it a lot because that creates inconsistency in the twist, inconsistency in the texture, which will not allow you to get an even pattern. So everything is done evenly. I have bricks in there so that one edge doesn't get hotter than the rest, because a square heats unevenly, which is what the garage is. So now Eric is going to come out and he's going to walk from there over to the reheating chamber, and he's going to go all the way in. And I'm kind of dictating to him what I want him to do. And this is not a race. You know, the Reticello technique takes time. No matter how good you are, I don't really care. I've seen the best glass makers in the world do this, and it's a very slow, tedious process. If you go fast, you're bound to make mistakes and have issues. So what Eric has done is he's taken a heat to begin to fuse these canes. It's not a very dominating heat. It's actually more of a saturating heat to get the components to all stick together. So I'm rotating it because it's going to heat unevenly because we're not rotating the plate in the reheating chamber. So I've rotated it. He's going to go back in for another heat. While he's doing that, I'm telling him, okay, you know, go this deep, go that deep, look at this, look at that. So he can't really feel what's happening. So we're all just looking at it together. So he's looking at what's going on. Now I told him right there, that's a good heat. I said, that's a good heat. You'll see things are glowing, but they're not really, really hot and melted. There's still a lot of definition. I don't know if you guys can see on the surface of the cane, there's a reflection of light. That reflection of light is a key that they're not totally melted flat, which is what we want. So that is an indicative sign. That is something that an experienced glassmaker would look for. If it's one constant line of light, that means you got it too hot. So looking at this, you'll see it's all fused together and hot, but you can still see the ridges in each cane. Very important. Okay, I've started to make my collar here. Eric is maintaining the temperature that I left him with. And this happens in real time. In less than 5 minutes, I'm ready. So he's taken a flash. I'm going to make the collar. The collar is basically, I'm blowing through a gather to create an open-ended piece of glass. So it's like a wheel on the blowpipe, and the pipe is exposed on the end. So I can blow through it. This is basically just a vehicle to roll the canes up on. And I have to make this the diameter of that pie divider that you guys saw. So I'm just using my jacks here as a shaping tool. This glass the mint color is a little soft. So I'm very, very mindful of how hard I touch it. You'll see I'm checking it to make sure it's the right size. I'm looking at the pattern in front of me to make sure it's okay. Once again, you can see that light going across it is still divided, which is great. That's what we want to see. Okay, so I'm going to make sure they're all fused. Okay, so now Eric's going to take the final heat. And what I'm telling him is, okay, just take a long flash. I'll be ready to go. Here we go. We're going to roll it up. So we touch down, hot glass sticks to hot glass, and I just roll. And now my sizing is pretty right on, but I prefer the collar to be a little bit bigger than a little bit smaller. I go straight up and down. I'm taking my time. I'm looking right at that seam and I'm putting it together. And I purposefully go straight up and down because gravity is working in my favor. Brushing it off, make sure there's no dirt and dust on it. Once I get done brushing it off, I'll say, Eric, okay, you can move the plate. He'll move it over to the next bench to sit there, and then he will start to put the second pickup on there. So what I'm doing here is I'm making sure everything is round and aligned. This is my only shot to really make sure the alignment of the seam is done correctly. I won't have another opportunity to adjust this. And you'll see right there, there's the seam. And I'm basically just making sure it's straight. If it's not straight, you'll get what's called a runner. And a runner is a cane that underlaps. It goes underneath the pickup as you start to twist, and it will create an inconsistency. So now this is a very important part of the process, is that I basically want to work this glass as cold as I can. And I'm starting to twist here, and you can notice that runner is becoming prominent. So what I've done is I've stopped, gone back for a reheat, and now I'm going inside with a pair of tweezers, and I'm going to push the runner up, and that will pretty much solve the problem. And
why are you working the glass as cold as you can?
Well, I have to work it as cold as I can because one thing that's indicative of the reticello is the bubbles which are created between every 4 canes. So if you overheat any one of these components, you no longer have surface texture, which inevitably gives you no bubbles. So what you're looking at here is the outside cup, which is going to be the outside of the reticello. So the inside is what's important. The outside is not very important, but the inside is very important. And here we're starting to twist using friction, just like burning the tires in your car on the street. If you stay in one place and turn, you're going to create friction. And what that's going to do is it's going to start to twist those canes. And once again, I'm looking at it to make sure everything's good. I feel pretty confident about this setup that I did. It looked good. It had been a couple weeks since I had made one. So I was, making sure my process was sound before I really was more aggressive. And you'll see I'm twisting it. The Marver, very clean, creates a lot of friction. One thing that's very important here is that one set of canes gets twisted one direction and the other set of canes gets twisted the opposite direction. So we need to simultaneously remember, okay, I twisted this to my right. The next one needs to get twisted to the left. That's very important. So this is a move I do several times. Eric's going to be getting the second pickup ready. He's going to put what's called the ferriti on the end. They're cast iron blocks to prevent the round canes from rolling off the plate. He's going to make sure everything's good. He's counting them to make sure we have the same amount of canes. I don't really trust a lot of people to do this. Normally, I separate the pickups myself and make sure they're all set to go. But I told Eric, as long as you double check with me, we should be good to go. And right here, I'm saying, okay, Eric, I'm going to need you to blow in a second because he's going to have to come over and blow. Right there, I tell him. So now he's going to take that pickup and put it on the plate. And it doesn't really matter how he treats it because they're all the same diameter. So what I'm doing now is I'm terminating the end of the pickup. And you'll see on the second pickup that that's an important aspect because I can't blow it until it is terminated on the end. So basically what Eric's doing, and that plate's still about 1,000 degrees, is he's laying those canes on there because in order for us to keep up with our time frame, we need to make sure this is laid out and has time to preheat. So he's going to use a pair of tweezers to make sure everything is nice and uniform. You can really treat these canes once they're separated like really like anything. I mean, they're not going to break. They're very strong. He's going to go blow for me right now. So as he's blowing, you know, I terminated the end. And basically what I'm doing is I'm twisting it a bit more. So I'm creating a little handle on the end, necking it in, going to use my diamond shears. I'm doing another twist. I'm holding and turning, and I'm moving very quickly. I can't go too slow here because if I go too slow, then I will melt the canes together too much and we will have a problem. So you'll see I'm moving quite rapidly, and I'm very purposeful with each movement, making sure everything is nice and even. Necking it in. This is the area that's going to break off the pipe. I'm watching the shape. If we had the sound on, you would hear the canes rasping against my tool because they're that prominent. So you would hear like a, you know, when you're driving down the rumble strip on the road, that's what it sounds like when I tool that. So what I'm telling Eric is how to make the punty for this cup. I'm telling him, okay, I want a punty that is X. It's basically this shape. So I'm looking at it here and I'm making sure my twist is tight as it can be. I am a human being. I'm not a machine, so I can only get it so tight. So basically what's going on here is I've twisted this and now we're going to open this up. You can see the twist is pretty tight. Eric is making the punty, which is basically totally different than yesterday's punty. It's just a hot finger. The reason why is because I really want it to fuse on to the bottom of this cup. If it doesn't fuse on properly, because the canes aren't melted in all the way, it'll break out the bottom of the cup. So what's really important here is that we have a connection that does not compromise the cup, since we just spent 2.5 hours making this cup. So here what we have going on is we've broken the cup off. We're going to be opening it up. Now this is a very underestimated part of the process. If you overheat this, you'll lose the definition in the top half of your cup, which will then totally compromise your reticello in an uneven pattern. So now we've opened up the cup. I'm creating a constriction on the punty here. The constriction, I'm going to break this off with this little gob of glass on the bottom. You'll see later on that's used as a like a handle. So what we've done here is we've taken the cup and we're going to put it in a box. It's called a pickup oven. That's at about 1,000 degrees. What that does is allow me to blow into this cup. Now this is what makes a reticello. Blowing into this cup creates two things, two patterns going two different directions, and also gives me the ability to trap the air bubbles in between the two parts. And Eric's got the next pattern going in the garage. This one's going to go a bit quicker because I've already made the first cup, and I need to get this in that first cup as soon as possible just for timing purposes. I don't like to let that cup sit for too long. So he's starting to heat it. I'm probably going to start making my collar a bit sooner because he knows that I want to get this cup full with the other bubble. Once again, we're going to rotate the plate. I believe that this next part of the video showing my collar is a little more zoomed in, so you could see actually how I make that collar. Okay, so once I do this one squeeze here where I make sure it's good to go, I'm going to say, Eric, okay, it's up to you. And then I'm going to go start my collar. So once again, I'm going to give it a little squeeze to make sure they're really stuck together. And then I'm going to go ahead and make my collar. Now, all Eric has to do is maintain We don't need to, we really don't want to overheat this. This is a very important part. So I've started to make my collar, which is just a single gather of glass. I'm going to cool the pipe. I'm taking my time. I really trust that Eric is maintaining a good temperature on the pickup. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hold the glass up so it falls back on the pipe, and then I blow through the pipe and I get a very thin bubble on the end. It's kind of like a little cellophane bubble, we call it. And what that is it's so thin that I can just break it either by touching it or by heating it. So I go in the furnace, I blow through the pipe, breaking the cellophane bubble, and then I take a little heat on it. The little heat allows me to, I'm basically timing this out so that I'm not in Eric's way when he needs to use the bench to sit the pickup down. So I'm going to take a little more heat here. And Eric is watching this pickup, making sure everything's good to go. And here I'll say, okay, Eric, let me sit down. He's going to take a heat. I'm going to sit down. And I'm going to start to shape this. Now, first thing I do is I go inside the center of the pipe, make sure the hole's clear. And then I push all remaining glass back away from the head of the pipe. I want the tip of the pipe exposed through the actual gather so that it can't be compromised by anything. It won't get clogged or it won't be manipulated in any way. So here I'm shaping the collar. You see right here, I'm pushing back and you can kind of see how the head of the pipe is exposed a little bit. And I'm looking at the pickup to make sure it's a good temperature. Once again, I'll check my diameter, good to go. A lot of times I don't even use the calipers. I kind of just go for it. So we're looking at it, making sure it's good. He's going to take his final heat and then I'm going to roll it up. Right here, we're going to roll it up again. I always roll up this direction because I can see what I'm rolling into. I would never roll the other direction because I can't see that way. Once again, straight up and down. This pattern goes together much easier, much nicer. So I make sure the top is straight and the bottom is straight. And then I brush it off. Eric moves the plate out of the way. Okay, we're just going to make sure it's straight one more time, going all the way in. It's the reason why I have long tweezers is to go inside these pickups. Now I'm looking at it down the pipe to see how straight it is. I actually have my head resting against my hand and I'm looking down the actual canes. So remember, I have to twist this the opposite direction. Oftentimes I'll just create a little situation where I remind myself, like maybe I'll put a mark on the floor or I'll move a tool a certain way. But oftentimes my assistant will be like, okay, remember to twist this direction. So once again, we're making sure everything is straight. And we're going to basically start to twist. This went together very well, so I could be a little more aggressive with how it is being twisted and moving along. I'm going to look at it. I always look at it pretty closely, make sure everything's good. I know it looks like the same part of the video that we already did, but it's because I do the same things over and over and over again. So here we go. We're going to start to twist it. And if you could hear it, it would sound like a bunch of tires rattling down the road. It's very, very prominent. There's a lot of ways to twist. A lot of people will use tools, but I try to touch the canes as little as possible. They're very sensitive. They show every little nuance. So it's a lot of this movement. It's a lot of this circle motion because it creates the most amount of force without compromising the canes. So once we get it worked down, basically what we need to do is we need to terminate that end and we need to blow it into the other cup. It's not really something that you can mess around with. Like you can't measure it to make sure it's the right size. You can't use a caliper. You can't use a measuring tape. You have to know what diameter you're going into. Now what I'm doing here is I'm making the area by the pipe a bit smaller because I know my cup is narrow. So I want to make sure that I'm just big enough to fit inside. The best thing to use to explain this is the further the cane has to travel to the cup, the less it's going to match the diameter of the twist that's there. So if I can make that very close to the size of the cup, basically it's going to fit perfectly and not cause any inconsistencies in the pattern. So we're getting very close here. I'm telling Eric at this point, okay, get the steps ready, get the stairs ready. I'm going to make it a little bit narrower. I'm going to have you blow, and then we're going to go in the cup. Those are pretty much the exact words I said. I'm making sure that it's narrow enough to get into the cup because I don't want to have to take another heat. And one thing to keep in mind is that the tip of the bubble, when you're making a plate or a bowl, is the most visual point in the plate. So the very bottom of the plate is the tip that I'm tooling. So I want to make sure that twist is very nice and concentric and not like messy and smeared. So that's why I terminate it. I keep terminating the end, cutting the end off, terminating it. And I do it probably once for each pickup and then once when I stuff the cup. So here we're going to go for it. We're going to open up the box. Now you'll see the cup is in there. I stand right on top of the box. I take my time. I work myself in there as much as possible. Now I'm not one to really, measure things too many times. I just try to get it as close as I can. You'll see right there, we filled it up. So a lot happened right there. We filled the cup. But this is the most important part right here is I'm actually going to have Eric cap the blowpipe with his hand. And I'm telling him I'm using my hand in motion, cap the pipe. And I'm going to apply pressure with a folded up wad of newspaper. And what that does is it actually captures every single bubble that's there because I'm sealing the cups together. My motion of blowing into it really doesn't do it all. And you'll see I'm pushing pretty hard. He's capping the pipe. And that kind of joins the two pieces together and allows the actual action of the canes to touch each other more. And, all day long, you could stop and look at this thing, but you're not going to know if you did it right until you're done. So I just move through the process. I don't, get too hyper-focused on it being exactly perfect. Normally, what I do is called making a seed. And a seed is I would make a reticello up to this point, and then I would anneal that bubble. I would look at it when it's cold to make sure it's up to standard, and then I'd reheat it and make a piece out of it. Because oftentimes the reticello, there's a lot of room for error. And so for the sake of this video, I am not going to do that, but I'm going to move right through the process. So you'll see the very tip of the bubble has a little bit brighter color. That's that button of glass that was on the bottom of the cup. And the reason why I'm not cutting that off yet is because that's my handle to pull the pattern out with without affecting any other parts of the pattern. So here, when I cut this off, this will be, I believe, the final time I terminate to create a nice even pattern. And I get really close and I look at it really, really close with my eye. Because if there's any unevenness in the pattern here, I'm pretty much right on top of it. You'll see that I want to make sure everything looks really good.
Now, speaking of cutting off, someone asked, are any of those pieces ever reused?
Generally, no, I don't really reuse stuff like that. A lot of it has inconsistencies in the pattern. I will recycle it and melt it again to make more glass, but I will not be making it into an object right now. It's kind of counterintuitive. It's all messy and garbled up. So, it would look cool in some aspect, but not exactly what I'm doing. So it's really hard to see, but here we go. Okay, so Pam zoomed in. You guys can see the crisscross in the pattern. It looks great. There's a thing called a moire, and the moire is when the pattern looks like it's moving when it's not moving because it's so tightly twisted. And that's what we want it to look like. That's what we need it to look like for this to be, in my opinion, a successful reticello. Okay, so this is part of my obsessive compulsiveness coming into play. What I've done is I've made a seed. You could see, like I would just anneal that right there. And I would look at it the next day and say, you know what, this looks really good. Let's heat it back up. But here, we're going to break it off the pipe. Okay, I'm looking at it to make sure that the end of it looks really good. And then we're going to put this on another pipe. Now, for any glassmaker who knows how important it is to have a nice on-center even bubble, would understand why I'm doing this, because everything I've done up to this point has been just to stuff that bubble into this cup. So now I'm thinking about, okay, I'm going to make something out of this. So the moil or the connection on the blowpipe, if it is uneven or off center, which it will be because I've twisted, I've stretched, I've blown, I've done a lot of stuff, it's basically going to cause that cane to want to rip off of there. So what I'm doing is I'm putting this cup on a brand new blowpipe with a brand new concentric even moil, which allows it to blow up and stretch and work itself evenly without any uneven heat from twisting and pulling and stretching. Very common in these complicated techniques, you would put it on another pipe. So here's the collar that I've made, and we're going to stick this right on there to make sure that it's, nice and even. Very important to do this kind of stuff. Whenever you're doing a really, really complicated technique like this, you don't want to skimp. It seems like, oh, well, a better glass blower would just be able to do it this way. This is really what separates a very conscientious glassmaker from somebody who just wants to do a technique. Because I've seen some of the best glassmakers in the world just work through the process, and they say to themselves, oh, I should have done this. Oh, I should have done that. So this is a very important aspect. Now you can see everything's much more even. It's in control. Notice how what's by the pipe is a darker color. That's because it's colder. And what's at the end of the pipe is brighter. So right now we have uneven temperature. Okay, so now what I've started to do is make sure the pattern is a good shape to gather on, because this is not enough glass to make our plate out of. So right here, I'm going to cut off the very end. Very conscientious of cutting off just the very tip, because I don't want to lose too much of the pattern that I have. I'm going to cut that end off, smooth it out, and then I'm going to gather on it.
Now before you're using, here we go, the wet paper. Can
yes.
you, I mean, like, your hand seems awful close to that really hot piece of glass. Can you feel the heat through that newspaper?
No, you can't feel the heat because the steam barrier is so prominent. It's not really going to affect you that much. If you have a thin newspaper, sure, maybe, but it's so wet that what you see isn't smoke, it's actually steam. Mm-hmm. And the steam is allowing the glass to float between the paper and my hand and everything so, uniformly. So right here, what we're looking at is we're looking at the setup to gather on. I'm taking a flash. Eric is raking the furnace to make sure there's no bubbles in there. Something that's very important to note here is that this is a very thin bubble because we've worked it so much. So the idea of gathering on it is a very risky procedure. It wants to collapse. It wants to fall apart. So I'll come out and I'll strip off a lot of glass right in the bucket there. So if you go in with a too hot a bubble, you can undo the twisting that you just did, or it can collapse on itself. So oftentimes what I do is I spray water on the glass so it cools it very quickly. And I learned this from watching several other glassmakers do their Reticello technique, and understanding it really makes sense. You'll see Eric grabs a squirt bottle and I'll say to him, okay, we're good. We don't need to do anything, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes I've gathered on Reticellos that are so thin and so hot that they just start moving around and people have to spray them. That really helps keep it in check. And it's a viable technique in this instance. So here we've gotten all the glass to make the plate that we're going for. I'm just turning it, allowing the heat to saturate, turning it both directions to make sure that we're not going to untwist anything. Very important that you're careful about how much force you apply. The canes are very sensitive. They will untwist and they will get compromised very, very quickly. Eric's lighting a torch back there. So here we're taking a heat. I'm stretching it a little bit. I'm watching. This is a question I often get asked is, why are you just flailing around and moving it around like that? I'm using force to move the glass without touching it. And it's all calculated, holding it up, holding it down. It's a very common practice in the Venetian style because things are often so hot that you can't just touch it. You'll see the glass is moving very rapidly. And I'm using different techniques to make this happen very quickly. This is indicative of the Venetian style. This is how Italian glassmaking got so popular, is these guys were so fast, so aggressive, so dominating when it came to a technique. They would be able to make stuff so quickly and so efficiently. So here we're shaping the bubble for the actual inflating and blowing up of the final shape. The whole time I'm doing this, I'm watching to see how it's actually moving. If it feels uneven, I might take a second, reheat again. You'll see I'm moving pretty quickly. It's very hot. I got the paper holding the bottom. Eric's going to blow. You start to inflate. So now I'm starting the neckline. So the neckline is very important because this is where it's going to break off. This is also dictating how much of the material of the pattern I use. Sure, I could neck it in right next to the pipe, but to be honest with you, I often refer to cane working as filleting a fish. You want to take the best section. You don't necessarily want to use the whole thing. So the best section between the end and the top is going to be the best bet. So oftentimes I will cut it in and leave remnants on the pipe. So right there, I used gravity and centrifugal force to shorten that bubble up. So we have a low profile for our plate that we're doing. And you can see the very tip of the bubble is much thicker. That's what we want. That's going to be our thick spot that allows us to punty and do things. Now this plate gets a foot on it, very similar to yesterday's picture. I put a foot on this plate. If you think about and design an object, you want to do something that helps promote the technique. So if you have a plate just sit on the table, oftentimes the counter or the table will compromise the way the pattern looks. So if you float it up with a foot, it gets light underneath it and allows you to see the pattern. So that's one of the reasons why I do this. So right there, I've told him to go ahead and get the foot. Here you could see the alignment of the pattern looks pretty good. I feel pretty confident about it. Not much I can do about it now if it's not right. So we got to really, move forward. It's moving pretty good still. I want to make sure I keep it on center. Eric's gathering up the foot. Now here he's blocking the foot because it's a much bigger foot than yesterday. And he wants to make sure that it's going to be concentric and even. So he's using a block to shape it up. This is just full mint glass. There's no clear involved in this piece at all.
Now, speaking of Eric, someone had asked, what kind of experience Eric had before he came to assist you, if any.
Eric had a pretty good understanding of the material. It's really his attitude that promotes him being able to help out with stuff like that. He listens and takes information very well. Like I said, oftentimes when I work with people who are learning how to make glass, it's not about being able to do the technique. It's about being able to listen and persevere and work through the ups and downs. And Eric does a really good job of that. He listens, follows direction. He's vocal when he has a mistake or if he's like nervous about something. So, Eric's experience level is low. He went to school. He just got out of school this year. He's never made a Reticello before in his life. He's never done any of this stuff before. So I told him, I said, the best thing you can do is just listen to what I say. And then, we can work through it together. And he does a very, very good job of that.
Yeah.
So here we're making sure the foot is on center. This kind of dictates how the bowl will open. So you can see there's a bit of asymmetry there, but that asymmetry can be corrected very easily because if I touch the foot to the bottom of the bubble on center, then I can straighten things and make sure that they're going to be on center. But if I touch it off center, then that's when you really have a problem. So the foot is on center, but the profile of it, because of how we're manipulating it, is off center. So you'll see that I'll straighten it up by the time we transfer. So here I'm going to throw some heat on the top of this. Once again, you could tell just by looking at it, there's differences in temperature. The foot is much hotter than what's up by the pipe and so on. So basically, I want to take some time to even that temperature out. So here's a punty. We're going to make sure we're nice and on center. We're going to move very, very easily through the motions. Now you can see that off-centeredness now is in the bowl. And I did that on purpose because I can straighten that as I open it. So if I put my off-centeredness too far in one direction, I can't straighten it. So this is all methodically thought out as far as how to deal with this. And this is part of it too. We're working with the human eye. There's no molds. There's no real tolerance tool that you can use except your eye. Okay, so here we have a heat. Now this is my only opportunity to straighten it. For instance, if I was to say, oh man, this is really off center 3 heats from now, everything would be so hot that I wouldn't be able to straighten it. But oftentimes I can straighten things pretty well right here at this point, but I deem it okay. So I start to heat the top section. And we joked back and forth about this piece when we were making it because we referred to it as the kitchen sink because I put everything on this. We're going to put a lip wrap on it in a second. The only thing it didn't have was a handle. So here I'm looking at the top to make sure that the pattern is not jumbled up. And if it's jumbled up, I can trim it. And I have to do it now because if I wait too long into the process, then it's too hot and I can untwist and really screw the pattern up. It's very important here. I'm straightening to make sure things are nice and even, but I deem it okay. Eric's going to get the lip wrap ready. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just maintain. It doesn't seem like I'm doing a whole lot, but I'm just making sure everything's on center. Here comes Eric with the lip wrap, straight up and down. I touch it down, and then I just turn. This is exactly how you would see a Venetian put a wrap on. There's really not a whole lot of tooling and shaping going on. It's pretty raw. I think it's great. Okay, so now we have the lip wrap. We're going to make sure that we join it into the bubble in a pretty good fashion. What you see here is a pair of Parchofis. These were given to me by a maestro who passed away a couple years ago. They're made of solid Teflon. You don't see a lot of other factories using them, but Teflon doesn't take any heat out of the glass. It doesn't mark the glass. And when I worked in the lighting factory, it was a tool we used all the time because lights, you can see right through them. So this tool is very indicative of a Venetian style. You don't see a lot of people use these for a lot of reasons, but this particular tool I use all the time to open stuff up. It's it's a very good tool. Once again, using the newspaper. Now this goes back to, you know, glass blowing, how I'm setting this up, a low profile, turning even, a lot of paddling to make sure the lip is flat. We want to create a low profile because we want to make a low shape. I wouldn't take a cylinder and turn it into a plate. I want to work it back slowly. And this is a real nail biter because I make it as wide as I can while fitting it in the reheating chamber so that it has a nice low profile. And in a perfect world, I would like it to be lower, but it worked out pretty well. So we're just using the newspaper to slowly work it back and make sure that that profile is really kind of in line, like a nice even curve. We don't want any of this like abrupt, straight-sided shape. You want a nice curve coming in. So here we're going to use the paper. Now we're getting pretty much towards the end of this. I would say, you know, honestly, I set this up so I can use centrifugal force to kind of spin this out. And you'll see Eric gets suited up because it doesn't fit back in the reheating chamber when I'm done. So here I'm going to introduce a little bit of heat in a very specific spot, which is the ridge. I don't want the back section to move that much. I really just want the ridge line to move. So I'm going to throw some heat there. I'm looking at the pattern to make sure it looks good. And now we're going to take another heat, and you'll see it's tight. It's a real squeaker. It's pretty much like right there. And you know, I have no attachment to the pieces when I'm making them other than the process. So honestly, I'm open to anything happening. If something happens, then I know that I pushed it too far. But this is just the way I work, and I'm very comfortable in the studio. I feel no real stress point when I'm working. It's a very easy motion. So turning very slow, I come out, and now I'm turning faster. You'll see centrifugal force opens it up. And now I'm going to create the architecture of the plate, which is, I want it to be low. I don't want it to be perfectly flat. I want it to have a nice little curve to it. So I'm using the chofes, the Parchofis, to actually create a contour. You'll see it's kind of hard because it's so low, but the contour is there. It's probably about 3 inches tall.
Yeah.
And we're just, you know, you'll see a little bit better here. There you go, right there. The architecture is pretty low. It kind of matches the foot, the way the foot is shaped, and the actual plate's the same profile. So here I'm going to throw a little heat on the back side of this because it's, you know, kind of, now this is what I'm talking about, the moire. It looks like it's moving when it's not moving because the way the canes are just kind of like flowing through each other. So here we'll put a little bit of water on the foot, and then just a light tap will take it right off of there. Both sides, Eric's fully suited up. You always want to hit with wood because wood has better resonance on metal than metal does. So you'll see I pick up a wooden paddle, just one tap, comes right off of there. Now we're going to go over and put it in the annealing oven. This anneals for, you know, a day or so. I tell them not to trip over the steps because I always fall over them. So there we go. That's pretty much it. And I know we're kind of tight on time, but we do have time for a couple questions, I think.
Yeah. And I think there's also another image of the final product that really shows that patterning work. I know that was great, Skitch. There we go. So if you see in the image on the right, it's really hard to see, but especially down at the bottom of the image, you can see the little bubbles.
Yeah.
So that was what you're talking about maintaining the spherical nature of the canes.
Right.
So when they meant there was that bumpy ridge.
Yes.
So you could get those.
if you
put
have,
them,
if
when you
it's
put
flat, you're not going to trap air everywhere. So the goal is to create uniformity through everything. So you could see that the spaces between the canes are pretty uniform to each other. The termination looks all right. There's bubbles there throughout the whole plate. I mean, it looks pretty good.
yes, it does. Yes, it does.
I've
Yeah.
experimented. I know there was another picture Marcy had here. I've experimented with putting other objects in the Reticello, and I made a Millville rose and put it in the center. Yeah,
yes, we
Don
talked.
Freeman,
Yes, our favorite Millville rose.
yes.
Yeah, no, this is fantastic. I have to admit, there's not a lot of questions, but there is a lot of congratulations and bravos and amazings.
Thank you very much, everybody.
So yes, so that's just an amazing technique. Now, now I guess you can make these. I mean, I've seen you make other work, and you can vary the diameter of those canes to get sort of a thicker.
I've done what's called the flat cane Reticello, where instead of making a cane that's a narrow rod, it's more of a band, and that's kind of like the Reticello technique. And if we want to go down this road at some point, maybe we can have another conversation about this later. That's more talking about the history. But Reticello derives from the word retta, which means net. So Venetians would do Reticellos with all kinds of techniques. They wouldn't just do this specific style of patterning. So I've done Reticellos with different style canes, different colors, different bandwidths. The one on the left, I made out of a Reticello that was gold, ruby, and white to match the color of the rose. I've done plaid Reticellos. I've done Reticellos that have several different colors. I've done a Reticello that has two different kinds of clear glass, so that the clear glass creates different magnifications. So you see a really nice bubble, and then you see this like different hue of clear glass. So there's a lot of things you can do with it. It's definitely one of my favorite things to do. But like I said before, there's a lot of ways to do this. And basically, this is a prime example of honing a skill set and working towards a specific goal. This technique is said to be one of the more advanced techniques to do. So, working up to this is kind of a goal amongst a lot of glass makers.
Yeah, and I think it's I think in fitting in the whole conversation here, you're taking this technique that stemmed out of Italy, and then you're putting your own spin on it. Like I know I've seen your plaid, when you sort of make a plaid Reticello, which I think is fantastic looking, so that being able to take these long-standing techniques, but then put your own spin on them.
Sure.
The Skitch-Mannion spin. Someone asked, what's the difference between Reticello and Latticino?
Okay. I think I have a minute. So Latticino and Reticello are two different things, because Reticello is the technique of using canes to make a pattern. Latticino is a type of cane. So there's many types of canes. There's Mezzanostre, there's filigrana, there's mezzofiligrana. There's a lot of different things. So Latticino is a type. And I figured that this question would come up. And the short answer is Latta or Latimo is Venetian for the word white, because Latimo was a style of glass that they would use. So Latticino basically means white twisted cane. And there's a variety of them, like thousands. When I was cleaning out some books I found a research paper I did in college, and I looked up all these canes and then recreated them. And there's thousands and thousands of patternings for canes. I mean, there's signature canes each factory had, and there's a lot of different things. So, but Latticino is a type of cane, which I could show you in the future, like Mezzanostre and, helixes and like all this other stuff, Ballantini canes and like all this other stuff. So it's really like the Reticello is the Ferrari of cane techniques, but there is so much more in the technique of cane working than just this one thing.
Yeah, and that's I know for those of us who were able to see John Hawley's presentation about some of those paperweights, I know that white backing is at least I've heard it termed a Latticello backing, so that makes sense. And we also saw some of those signature canes, some canes that kind of like a running rabbit and an eagle. Yeah. So we've seen a little bit. So that's a great connection to what John was talking about in bringing over some of those glass blowers from Europe, who had that cane knowledge and bring them here to the States to share those techniques. Well, we are, you know, we do want to keep moving along. And as you said, we could definitely keep talking about this. I know I could talk with you for days about these techniques, but we do want to give everyone else a chance.
Right.
And I know coming up, we have another very awesome set of presentations. So thank you, Skitch, so much.
No problem.
This has been really great. A lot of congratulations on this beautiful plate you've made. And again, thank you very much from me for always being so passionate and willing to share your skills and your knowledge with us. That really means a lot. So thank you so much for participating, and we'll see you back at the wrap up.
Yes, I'll be there. Thank you guys very much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
And can I just butt in a little bit and recognize Pamela Wakeman again for the wonderful video that she produced.
It was awesome. Thank you very much, Pam.
Yes.
Okay, guys, good luck.
Thank you.